Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. I'm going to knock out some more of these questions from the Q's and A's video. I did some yesterday on the Sunday chat and we got as far as Rock Dock, and that was 15 or 16 questions. There are 34 left. That's a lot, so I'm going to try and knock these out a bit quick. I probably won't get them all done, so this is part 2. There may be a part 3, but we'll get going and see how we do. Right, how often do you water your oncidiums? Well, the simple answer is when they need watering, but in practical terms most of my oncidiums are in pots. A few are mounted. Those in pots get watered with all the other pots irrespective of the orchid type, and that has gone from 8 or 9 day gaps during the winter to 5 or 6 days now, and as the days lengthen and hopefully we get some better temperatures during the day, that'll come down to about 4 or 5 days in between. But basically they need to, if they're growing, if they're actively growing, they shouldn't dry, but they should head towards dryness. Yeah, if they're dormant, if they've like finished flowering, there's no new growths, there's no root activity or anything, then I would keep, actually let them get dry in between and then give them some water. So, but that's how I treat them. Calcium, how important is it really? Then how much, how often, which genera are heavy calcium users, and of course too much detrimental to the plant. Strictly speaking, the simple answer is the plants can't have too much calcium. But what happens if the ratio of calcium to some of the other elements is too high? Some of the other elements will start shutting down. Yeah, or they'll start interacting with each other. So there is a happy balance there somewhere. It's very important at the end of the day. It's part of the cell structure building material. If you want to know how important calcium is, trees are calcium hogs. That's why they can stand up. Simple as that. And the other thing is, although not disputed but difficult to prove, although I have seen it, there was a forestry article that I was pointed at to have a look at. Calcium is so important to trees, they suck it out of the environment basically, so they take as much as they can possibly get, and they overdo it often, and they give it off at the bark, so they let some go and it sort of washes out in the rain. That's where the orchids get it from, allegedly. I can't prove that, but apparently trees are loaded with the stuff and they give it off, and epiphytes take advantage of it. Some genera are deemed more calcium dependent than others. I'm not so sure about that. Out in nature, how would it differentiate? How would this orchid know that if I grow in this place I'll get more calcium? It's going to germinate, it's going to grow where it's lucky enough to take root. It is said that Phalaenopsis are heavy calcium users. What I suspect that is that if you give them more calcium, they can use it. Whether they would ever get that amount in the wild, who knows? The balance of calcium needs to be not too high, and it needs to be in balance, most importantly, with magnesium. So if you've got, say, 8% calcium in your mix, then you need 2 or 3% magnesium. If your magnesium starts getting too high in relation to the calcium, they'll start bonding and they'll start doing all sorts of silly things, so go steady. A plant will probably only take in as much calcium as it can take in. So if you've got too much in your feed, it'll probably just get left in the pot. Theory, not practice. Right. Oh, sorry, I'm supposed to be saying who these are from, aren't they? The first question, how often do you water? That was Nancy Johnston. That last one about calcium was IMJAXS, however you say that. Next one is from Zula. Have you ever used organic liquid or powder fertiliser for your orchids? Fish emulsion is widely used for indoor and outdoor stuff. Yep, yeah. Along with fish bone and that sort of stuff. I wonder how this type of food can be used by orchids. I've never done it. I know some people use it as an additive at potting up time, so they put some in at that time. I don't think they feed their orchids on it regularly. They use it as a long-term, very, very slow release feed, I believe, but I don't do it. I stick to a feed. I know what's in it, and I know when I dissolve it in water how it's going to react with the plants. I'm happy with that. Gail Cunningham, you should be told off because you've got about 6 questions in here. Are pebble water trays effective in raising humidity beneath orchids, or even orchids if you're lucky? Will Masdevallias grow in lower humidity, i.e. 40 to 5%? No straight answer. Pebble trays under orchids can work quite well, but it depends on how much air they are trying to humidify. So if they're in a relatively confined space, they can actually raise humidity to a degree. If you had a really big room and those humidity trays were away from a corner or anything like that, the chances are they won't do a huge amount. But if your humidity is low, anything's better than nothing. Yeah. So they can do no harm. Just make sure your pot doesn't stand in the water. What I used to do when I had humidity trays, you've seen my drip trays underneath my plants. I used to put those on top of the pebbles and then stand the pot in there. So there's no way the plant could be standing in the water. The other way of raising humidity with humidity trays is to put other plants around, like ferns and things like that, and get a gathering. A community always produces a higher humidity level in its surrounds than a plant stood on its own. So will Masdevallias grow in lower humidity? I don't know, I've never tried it. They are mainly cloud forest dwellers, but some of them are found growing out in the open. They tend to, where they're found growing not in a cloud forest, not in a deep forest sort of environment, and they're out in the open, they tend to be quite high up. So the air is a lot thinner. How the humidity reacts in those lower temperatures, I don't know. Remember, the lower the temperature, the relative humidity goes up. So if they're cool growers and they are out in the open, they still might have reasonably good humidity. But I've never tried growing them in low humidity. Gail Cunningham again. Shall I pop my new bare root zygo in sphagnum moss or cocoa husk, perlite and bark? Have you ever used Kelp Max, and if so, what are the results? It's not only getting multiple questions in, but getting 2 in each one. Cheeky. Right, first of all, me personally, I would never buy a bare root zygo. Their roots are fragile, to say the least. And if they dry out totally like that, they're probably going to die. This is 10 days ago, so the chances are you've already done it. I don't use sphagnum moss anymore. My substitute for sphagnum moss is either live moss or a mixture of the cocoa husks and live moss. I don't use perlite. I used to have some giant perlite, sponge rock, American stuff that was sent over to me, but I don't bother with it anymore, quite honestly. Have I used Kelp Max? I do have a seaweed extract that I use, I could say once in a blue moon. It really is now and again. It's not very frequent at all. And I usually use it at quite low doses on top of a normal feed. It's like adding hormones into the plant, and it can stimulate certain growth types at certain times. But if you really dig into the science behind it, it can also do the wrong thing if applied at the wrong time. So if you need a plant to produce roots and the plant isn't in a position where internally it's ready to make roots, and you put that stuff in, it could have an effect on the flower spike, and it can deform blooms. But that's heavy doses. I don't use heavy doses. If I put my seaweed extract in on top of a feed, it's normally around 25 to 30 parts per million. Hardly any. It may do some good, it may not. I've never noticed the difference. But I've got the stuff, I like to use it now and again. That's that one. Yvonne Jarvie. After watching your video in Fusarium in one of your Oncidiums, I suspected my Oncidium also has it. There are lots that have it, and some people don't know they've got it. And apparently it's confirmed that it does. My question is, did you discard the infected plant parts and take it from there, or just treat the whole plant? My methodology is, I know you can only discover this, there are symptoms, but you can only truly diagnose Fusarium by cutting a rhizome and having a look for that purple ring around the outside, which is the telltale sign. Dreaded purple ring of death, but it doesn't always mean death. But in some cases it will, and no matter what you do, the plant will still go down. So you take your chance. But if you want to have a go at treating it, you need a systemic fungicide. No other type of fungicide will do. If it doesn't get right in the plant, it won't do the job. So it needs to be systemic. In some countries there isn't any, so you're knackered. And if you haven't got something like a decent systemic fungicide to treat the plant, although it's harsh, I suggest the best thing you can do is bin it, you know, and not let it possibly get anywhere near your other plants, because it can spread. It spreads mainly through injury, through wounds, through damaged tissue, you know, which is like when you cut and things like that. But it can spread through water. It's a remote chance, but it can. So what I do with an Oncidium type is, obviously I'm cutting an old bulb off, and if I discover it there, what you can't tell without continuing to cut bulbs off is how far into the plant it's got. And it may have only got into a few bulbs, and it has yet to get into the lead, the more vigorous part of the plant, but it could already be there. There's no way of telling. So what I usually do is the bulb I've cut off I accept, and then I have a look at the next one and think, is that a manky bulb? And if there's any hint that it's not useful to the plant, it comes off. And then I get another look at the cut. And it might be that it's just as bad, it might not be as bad at that point. So, you know, that always gives you hope. But the idea is that you stop it spreading through the plant anymore by your systemic fungicide treatment, yeah? So you stop it spreading anymore. The plant then has chance to grow clean. So growths from that treatment should grow out without an infection. Down the line, you're probably going to repot again. And that's the time I would take off the infected part, when the new part has had chance to grow clean. Yeah? And that also gives you a chance to check, because you're going to do another cut. Doesn't always work. But it needs to be a systemic fungicide. Disinfectants and various cleaners and things, they're not going to do it. It's not the same thing. It needs to be a systemic fungicide. Right, what else? I bought some Cleary 3336, which mentioned, I know nothing about that. That's not something I can get, so I don't know anything about that. Right, next one, Lisa Ford. When buying new genera of orchids, what is the research you would start with? Best information needed to start a new genus, or genius as it says here. Spell checkers, autocorrect. Basically, the first things I would check are temperature range and light requirements, because although I can adjust lighting, if it's a really high light genus, that might not be the best choice. But now here, as opposed to the old place, I would give it a go, because I've got much better light here and more even light. But the temperature range is important. I know what my temperature range is, and if it doesn't fit into that, it's going to struggle. It's not going to be in its happy place. So those are the two things I would look into. And the next thing possibly is look up some care guides and various things and see if You see if there's enough people around that say, this is really difficult and I've killed 3 already. Then you sort of think, is it really worth it? But I've taken some of them on in the past and struggled. Zygos were my nemesis. I've got them going now, but it took a long time, and you know, the expenditure of buying plants, repotting them, thinking they're okay, and then just watching them go down. Yeah, but I think I've got the hang of it now, mainly. That's that one, right. Next we've got Squeaky 35. How frequently do you fertilise your mounts? The same as all the rest of your orchids or more often? 2 answers, because yes, it's the same as all the rest, but no, it's not, because they get watered a lot more frequently. So they're getting food arriving at their roots more frequently in lapse time, in time scales. If you say like in the growing season, my pots will get fed twice and flushed once, possibly 3 times and flushed once, depends how I feel. Yeah, no calendar or checklist or anything. It's can I be bothered to knock up some feed? Nah, blow it, they can have a flush. It's that sort of attitude. It's not a science. So if I'm feeding them twice and there's a 4-day gap in between, yeah, then they're getting 2 feeds in 12 or 13 or 14 days. My mounts in the growing season are getting watered at least every 2nd day, and sometimes they get a spray on the day in between. So if they were getting 2 feeds followed by a flush, they're getting 2 feeds every 6, within 6 days, not 12 days. Yeah, but it's because they get watered more often. Yeah, that's all it is. That's that one. Venny Hamilton. Can you name a fast-growing orchid not foul? Well, that would be the last one I'd choose as a fast-growing orchid. Miltonias, Brassias. I can only go by what I've got and what I've watched, what I've seen, and that's probably about it. Some Oncidiums. A lot of it just really depends on whether they've got a good root system and if they're in a happy place. Yeah, if my growing environment is not the right growing environment for them and it's on the edge one way or the other, then they won't do as well as they could do. So they might not be as vigorous as they could be in somebody else's environment. So it's all subjective. It's all subjective. Right, this looks like a long one. This is, oh God, how am I going to say that? Sommer Fuglen 01. I have a Dendrobium primulinum that's entering its first full season with me. Bought it as a flowering size plant. Yeah, a lot of people say that. In addition to 2 basal growths, there are probably also 4 or 5 kikis. Primulinum does grow kikis, it's what it does. To one extent or another, sometimes a couple, sometimes loads. Kikis that are even bigger than the basal growths. I want to encourage full-length canes. That's good because that's where the blooms are going to be. The kikis are probably not big enough to survive if I took them off now. For a kiki to survive, it needs its own little root system and open leaves. Both, not one or the other. And then they'll take quite quickly. And if you want to get them off to a really good start, wrap some moss or something round the roots a couple of weeks before you take them off the plant, and that acclimatizes them to being in something instead of being aerial roots. But don't compact it, make sure they've still got some air. That'll get them going quicker. What else have we got? But should I discard them now to encourage the 2 basal canes to grow? How do I prevent kikis in the next season? Well, if you find that out, let me know, please. Some plants are prone to it. Some say that they will grow kikis if they're too warm. Some say they'll grow kikis if they're too cold. I think they grow kikis because they want to. But anyway, as far as a plant, you've got a plant's overall strength, and it will be pushing that into any of the new growths. And that will include the kikis and the basal growths. There's a net amount of energy to push into all of those growths. If you reduce the number of growths, the net amount of energy will push into what's left. So the logic would be, if the kikis come off, the basal growths will use the residual energy. The exception to that is leaves. Leaves photosynthesize and push food into the plant. They help the process of producing the sugars and things that help the plant grow. So if the kikis have got lots of leaves on and you take them off, you're reducing the energy of the plant. Happy balance there somewhere. Not a straight answer. Lynn Coleman, my phals all had shorter stems and of course fewer blooms this year. What should I do for the next bloom? Buy some new ones. The phals that you buy in the stores are force grown in mass production units basically. They're given perfect temperature, perfect day lengths, perfect light levels, industrial type feeds with hormones added in, and they're in a very, very happy place that is virtually impossible to recreate, and they're forced up into bloom. Then you buy them and bring them home. They're now not in that happy place, they're in your place. And the chances are it's a shock to their system. They've lost their real happy place. And some of them will sulk for a couple of years and refuse to bloom and don't grow any leaves and don't grow any roots. They just sit there sulking. And then they'll come back into life and they'll start growing things. Most of the time that will be a new leaf and possibly some roots, sometimes at the same time, sometimes separately. But the chances of you ever getting them back to how they were when you bought them are quite slim. But as the years progress, the plant acclimatizes and starts building its strength up. The idea being that each year you gain at least one leaf. So if you had 4 when you got it, yeah, the chances are by the end of the next year you'll only have 3. Maybe you'll grow a new one, 4. But the idea is you increase the number of leaves, and that increases the net strength of the plant. And every now and again when it's that time for that plant, some are summer bloomers, some are autumn, some produce their spikes in the autumn to bloom in the winter. They vary, depends what went into their makeup. But basically, every time it gets to that plant's time to think about blooming, it will assess its net strength. And if there isn't enough to produce a spike, then it won't. It'll chuck out another leaf instead to gain that strength. So all you can do is keep the plant as best as you can for that type of plant. Now for a phal, that means keeping it warm. That means not letting the night temperatures drop too much and making sure there is a daytime and nighttime difference. And ideally that daytime temperature needs to be like 25 to 28 with at least 13 or 14 hours good light. Not strong light, I mean daylight, day length. They don't need high humidity, but they like some. So 50 to 60% is normally happy for them. And they feed. They will use a fair old bit of food. So all you've got to do is try and get your happy place to be as close to their previous happy place as you can, and they'll do better. Right, next one, Clint Parsons. If your house was on fire and you only had enough time to rescue a single plant, which one would it be? Well, first of all, it would be the cats, then it would be my laptop, then it would be a few other items, and eventually I'd start thinking about the plants. And if I had time to get one of them, I'd have time to open the door and throw loads of them out in the garden. I think what somebody's saying is, what is your favourite plant? It would probably be my Dendrobium hercoglossum, simply because it does well for me. It grows well, it blooms really well, and I've had it a very long time and looked after it all that time. It's gone through a couple of troubled times where the moth routed, the mount rotted. Oh, come on, brain. The mount rotted and took down a lot of the root system, and I had to put it on a new mount. It took a while to grow a new root system. So, it's had a disturbance here and there, but yeah, that would probably be the one because I've had it the longest and it does so well for me. And if I had to start that one again, I'd end up with a plant with about 3 canes on if I was lucky. That plant I've probably had 2013, 2014. I've had it a long time. So, right. Hi, what type of humidifier do you use? This is from Penny Hodge. It's an HR15. You don't need to know the make, because they do an HR15 and an HR50, which is the big jobby. They only do those two, and a Google search will find them just on those codes. So you don't really need to know the make. They're not cheap. I mean, you can find them second hand now and again. They're pretty sturdy and long lasting, so a second hand one would probably be okay. But you know, you've got no guarantee. The parts could all be worn, and it's, you know, it's on its last legs. You never know. But they're not cheap. But they're, you know, they're a commercial type of humidifier. They're built to last and do the job. So that's that. Goodness me, I haven't got a clue how long I've been on. What does that say? That says 26 minutes, so we can do a bit more. Oh, blimey, another long one. This is Megan Fletcher. Just purchased a long cane dendrobium, nested cross with Adastra? I haven't heard of that. From an orchid nursery that had loads of kikis. I'm hoping it's because the plant was kept too warm. That's can be true, but it isn't always. Some of those kikis are only 1.5 to 2 inches long, with a decent root system, but they are now starting to produce new growths only from the original kikis. Oh, this is complicated. Should I wait for these newest growths to grow on more before I remove the original kikis from the mother plant, since they currently are using the mother plant's strength? Or should they be removed so they can be in a medium that truly keeps them hydrated without me watering the kikis every few days? There's another part to that question which I'll do later. The anosmum types, Esther's a primary cross I believe, do grow kikis, some more than others, and a hybrid would depend what's in it. The problem with kikis are they do sap the strength of the plant, but if the plant's strong and healthy with a really good root system and you feed it adequately, it will cope. It will grow those on, and they can become canes in their own right, as long as the normal canes, sometimes even longer, and they can even produce kikis themselves. It gets, you know, bushier, shall we say. 1.5 to 2 inches long with a decent root system is only half the story. They need open leaves as well. Yeah. If you have kikis that have roots, reasonable roots, I don't mean little stubs just showing, I mean they've grown on a bit and they've got open leaves, you can take those off and start new plants, and you then reduce the energy that the plant is using to grow those kikis. Yeah, but as I said before in a previous question, you're removing leaves. If you remove leaves, you remove some of the ability to photosynthesize. There's a happy balance in there somewhere. I personally let kikis grow for a bit and see how strong they are, because some of them are wishy-washy and weak. They're not very good at all, and if you took them off they probably wouldn't grow very quickly, and they might not grow at all for a year or two. They just sit there and sulk. But a good, strong, healthy one, I like to remove them. And if it's a mounted orchid, which these types would be for me, I plant them back on the base to start yet another plant from the base and have the pendulous canes. But that's just me, not everybody does that. And then the next bit of this question, I also was wondering if any of your anosmum semi-alba form kikis have survived from your plant. Now that involves a hell of a good memory, because I haven't had that alba form or semi-alba form for many, many years. The plant went down and I can't remember whether other people had kikis off of it, or I don't know. I do not have that plant anymore. So simple answer to that one. Right, where are we now then? Caro M. 2 questions. At the Wessex show you mentioned there was a mule ear Oncidium type in bloom. Does that grower have a social media account? I don't know who the grower was, and I don't know them. personally. I also have that orchid and would like to reach out to him and pick his brains. I don't know who it is. I mean, I could find out, but it would probably be hard work because the show was quite a while ago now. What is your opinion on using rainwater to water the plants? Is it good water? Does it carry pests? Is there good nutrients in that water? Would you use that as a flush run? Thank you. Caroline from Montreal, Canada. Yeah, I didn't know that. Oh dear. Do you remember in the old films, you know, the music used to go like that and it used to say the end in case you didn't know. And in American films, if they're in another country, it will say London, England, because people don't know where London is, do they? Stating the obvious. Right, rainwater. Rainwater can be good stuff. It can also be quite bad. It needs to be stored in clean containers, and those containers need cleaning on a regular basis, probably a couple of times a year. Has it got nutrients in it? Not much. It's not pure water, but a lot of it depends on what it dragged down out of the air. If you live in a reasonably industrial area or city or anything like that, the air above you is not clean, and the rain comes down with some of that stuff. The pollution is in the rain, and that would give it a higher TDS value. And what it's got in it, you don't know. Yeah, I mean, that could be, you know, quite acidic rain. I mean, there was a time when we chucked out so much into the atmosphere in the UK with all the coal and all that sort of stuff that forests in places like Norway were dying because of the acid rain. We put the muck up in the sky, the prevailing wind took it over the North Sea and dumped it on the forest, and it was killing them. It was that bad. Not that bad now. But where the runoff is for the rain to be collected is very important. There are certain types of roof tiles and things that are not good, and they will leach into that rainwater and then into your water, and some of that is not good stuff. Yes, they can get pests. They're an absolute breeding ground for mosquito larvae. So swings and roundabouts. If you can collect it off of clean surfaces, keep it in clean water barrels, it's probably quite good stuff. And it's free. That's a bonus. I mean, I'm on a water meter now I'm here, so my RO water is actually costing me money. Whereas it still used to cost me money in the other place, except for it didn't matter how much I used, I paid the same amount. Whereas now that varies. So there's not much nutrients in it, it can carry pests, and it can be good stuff, but it can also be not very good. If it's stored like where the sun gets on the barrel and warms it up, it can go stagnant and get smelly, and you definitely don't want that. So yeah, swings and roundabouts. I currently don't use it on my orchids, but I will do in the future for the stuff in the garden, once I clean the barrel out and get the roof clean. Right, how are we doing on time? 33, we can do a few more. Mona, or Mona, however you want to say it. This doesn't have anything to do with orchids, but that's sneaky. Your daughter Hannah sounds like such a sweet and wonderful person. Yes, well, my opinion, of course. You speak about her visits and her great ideas. Can we expect to see her in any of your upcoming videos? No. She doesn't like being on camera at all. She has been caught inadvertently in a few videos in the past. A few of the show videos, like where there's long tables and I'm filming one side and she stood on the other side having a chat to somebody, you know, but that's about as much as she'll ever do. She's not gonna like pose and volunteer to be in a video. That ain't gonna happen. Right. Tom S. Now that your grow room has a door to the outdoors, people keep asking me that. I'm not taking my orchids out in the garden. Pests, slugs, snails, freezing cold rain, sharp drop in temperature at night. No. They're not going out in the garden. My highlight orchids may do better out there, but if I took them out, where's the highlight? How is the light that side of the glass any different to this side unless you involve the sun? And if I involve the sun, I'd have to shade them. not thought through. Yes, but the door will be fixed, and I will certainly be going in and out the door, and so will the cats, but not the orchids. They're staying in. There's also a drop like that. So, you know, I've got, what am I going to do? I can only carry 2 plants. What I'm going to do, take them out, bring them back in at night, have a look at the weather forecast every day. What's it going to happen? Is it going to rain for a week and I don't want them out there in that? It's not going to happen. Simple answer. Mel, please consider doing a series of videos on pests and diseases. I'd love to be able to say no because I haven't got any. Those types of videos are very difficult to do without using other people's pictures. I mean, yes, I have some scale out there, and at the moment that's all I've got. I do get a bit of rot every now and again. You know, that's either a bacterial or a fungal infection. Quite honestly, if you've got pests, then get a systemic pesticide and just deal with it. Or a soapy wash if you don't like chemicals, just a neutral soap, like my hippie soap stuff. You know, a pure soap, a little bit of alcohol and some water, mix up a spray and spray it. If it's aphid type pests, quite honestly you can blast them off with water. You don't even need to add any. But if you add a little bit of soap and some alcohol, the alcohol will get into them better with the soap. But there's videos and documents and everything that you could possibly want on the internet. One individual adding to that is not going to make any difference. Gail Cunningham again, sneaking another one in. You have very agile hands. Were you a surgeon or a violinist? No, but I'm good at cutting things up. No, in both cases. I have played clarinet, flute, keyboards badly, guitar, bass, what else have I had to go at? Recorder, which you had to do at school. It was a lesson. So I've played various instruments, but the only string instruments I've played are guitar and bass. Right, Fenella Tutu, I think that probably is. My question is, what do you find is the best solution for cleaning your potting equipment? You mentioned hippie soap. No, it's hippie soap, as in the 60s, hippie, flower power. Hippie soap. And where can I get this? You'd have to go back, find my videos where I actually use the stuff, and I actually put the formula that I used in the description, but I'm not doing it all again. At the moment, the hippie soap that I used, that was not specifically for cleaning anything. It was to actually get rid of pests on the plants. Quite honestly, when I wash my pots and things like that, I just use hot soapy water. I don't use anything special. I give them a good scrub with a brush, get into all the nooks and crannies, and then I rinse the soap off and put them to dry. So I don't do anything special. You can use a mild bleach solution. That will kill off spores and fungi and moulds and stuff like that, whereas the hot soapy water might not. You might leave a few behind. But I always sort of go along the lines, these gnarly old hands, if I can only just get my hands in the water and you're a pest that's only that big, I don't think you're going to make it, basically. So that's that. Right. Oh, I can never say this. I keep looking at it thinking, how am I going to say that? Helen, I'm going to spell it. URQUHRT. Make what you will of that. I've had Dendrobium longicornu for about 6 months. I haven't got that one, so I'm not going to know anything about it. It came with one flower and lots of kikis, Burnhams. You sure there wasn't another one there that didn't have a flower but also didn't have the kikis? Always worth having a look at Burnhams. They've very rarely got one of anything. And often the one that's the one you want is the one that's fallen over at the back that nobody's bothered picking up. One became separate, and I popped it in a tiny pot of sphagnum moss and ignored it all winter. It looks as though buds are developing. How do you deal with it now? And the mother plant. Well, if you've got a cane that broke off the plant and it's budding, it's using whatever stored energy it's got, and that'll drain it. So if that cane hasn't grown any roots yet, now with the longer cane dendrobiums that have got the sections and the leaves coming out alternately from each node on those sections, you can actually cut those canes into sections and lay them on sphagnum moss, and some of them will grow a new plant from the leaf joint, which will have roots and grow some leaves and can be grown on as a plant. So you might want to try that. But if that cane hasn't got any roots, the chances are it's not going to get any. And if you let it bloom, the chances are it'll die afterwards, because it'll drain its energy, because you can't replace it. You can't put some more energy in if it hasn't got roots. If it has got roots, then I'd take the buds off and plant it. And the mother plant, what are you supposed to do with that? I've got no idea the care on that one, whether it's a cool grower, intermediate, whether it's a high light, medium light, I don't know. The information will be on the internet, bound to be. Orchidspecies.com is the best place to start. It'll have a simplistic description, but often there's enough in there to get you going. Gail Cunningham again, naughty. Just one more question, yeah, I'll bet. Have a mini fowl, buds opening, and they are purple, splotched with so far as I can see. Splotched so far as I can see. Could they, still mostly tight, 5 of them, have been dyed? Not if you've grown the spike. The dyed ones, the dye is introduced as the spikes are growing, and it's normally some plant-based dye, and it will be for that spike only. There's very rarely enough residue in there to actually affect the next spike that starts from scratch, because by then you've watered it and you've effectively flushed it through, so it'll go back to normal, which is normally white. Right, where did we get to? Could have been dyed, so that explains that. Wouldn't the colour in this plant have to be genetic, since I don't think it has ever bloomed before? If it's never bloomed before, why are you suspecting it's died? Who would have dyed that then? It was a gift, but no presence of old cut spike. Well, whether it's died or not, what are you going to do? Cut the spike off? Just let it grow and see what happens. But if it's never bloomed before and it's blooming now, it's highly unlikely it's been dyed, unless you're really cramping up the time scale. But it's highly unlikely. The dyes are put in, they're fiddly to do, and well, they can be, and they're done for that set of blooms to sell the plant. Yeah, so have a think about that. Right, channel called KT, as in capital K space T, capital T. I need to mount some dendrobiums and bulbophyllums. That's brave. Most people pop bulbophyllums. I mean, the only one I've got's mounted, but a lot of people don't go down that road. Can you please demonstrate how to mount one of them, especially focusing on the V tie-off? Also, please discuss when to put sphagnum moss under the orchid you're mounting and when not to. Literally, within the last few days, I've mounted 2 plants. Most of what you're asking is in that video. Also, if you need to know how to use YouTube to the best advantage. You need to get to my homepage. If you don't know how to do that, you've got comments under a video and they've got replies. And that reply's got my channel name above it. If you click on that, it will take you to my homepage. Yeah? And then in the banner headings across there, one of them is videos. You click on that, you get all my videos up. Every single one of them there has ever been. Right back to the year dot. And then there's a little magnifying glass you can click on, which allows you to search those videos. You're searching the title. And I would suggest you have a search for knots, as in K-N-O-T-S. Because I did a video with a piece of rope so that you could really see what I was doing, and demonstrated all the knots that I use in mounts. So now trying to demonstrate that with fishing line is almost impossible because I've got a job to see it. And a lot of the time nowadays I wire. So have a look at that video over the last few days, then search my videos and look for knots. There is a very specific video showing how I tie all my knots with quite a thick piece of rope so you can see it really clearly. At least I think you can. It's an old one, but the knots don't change. What's the time doing? Oh, that'll do, I think. We'll do one more because we've got another Gail Cunningham coming up. So this one is Petra Pills. Hi Roger. What's your opinion about cutting the flower stems of first blooming orchids early so the plant can save its strength for new structures and the second blooming? Greetings from Bavaria in Germany. A lot of that will depend on whether I think it's bloomed before I got it. That's not always obvious. But if it genuinely is a plant's first blooming, purely depends on how you see the strength of that plant. If that plant's been struggling in your care and hasn't been growing too well, then you are probably better off taking the spike off early, before the buds form, because the energy's going into making those buds. Get the spike off. And then try and improve the care for the plant and get some strength into it. If it's a plant that's bursting with energy and strength, then you can probably let those blooms form. I mean, if you think if the plant was in the wild, nobody's going to come along and snip that spike off, are they, first time it blooms? So in the main, I'd let it go. But if the plant's a bit weak and doesn't seem to be doing that well, then take the spike off very early before the buds start to form, and then you've stopped it wasting any energy with that spike. Right, well, we haven't finished yet. I'll just do a quick count. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 9 left to do. And no, I can't carry them forward, can I? I can't cut and paste comments from different videos. I'll have to do another quick one to get those done. I'm not doing them now, I'm tired, and this video is coming up to 50 minutes, which is more than long enough. And I've got to process this before I go to bed yet. I have some help. You notice I've done all of that and I didn't even pick that up, did I? I don't know why I pull this out sometimes, I just sit and look at it. Anyway, thanks for dropping by. If your individual questions come up there, I hope you've had an answer that you understand and is okay for you. And I'll get on to the next lot as soon as possible, whenever that is. I started doing my talk today. I haven't got very far, but it's kicked my ideas off. By starting, I've now got the ideas, I've just got to put it together really. Spent a lot of time digging stuff off the internet today. Shh, don't tell anyone. See you next time. Bye for now.